It's just past midnight on the last day of August 1997. While Parisians enjoy the warm weather, a desperate chase takes place in the heart of the city.
It was like a gangland assassination.
Diana, Princess of Wales, is killed in a terrible car crash, with her lover, Dodi Al-Fayed, beside her.
Let me say again how very sad Hillary and I are about the terrible accident that has taken the life of Princess Diana.
Nearly 20 years later, despite exhaustive investigations in France and Britain, disturbing questions still remain about that fatal crash.
I do not believe it was an accident, and neither did the jury.
Now, an internationally renowned police detective re-examines the case. He finds that what most people think they know about the death of Princess Diana is wrong. He discovers startling new evidence which gives this tragic story an entirely new ending. Colin McLaren has served on more major crime task forces than any other Australian detective. He's led numerous murder investigations and risked his life undercover to convict 10 mafia bosses. Since retiring from the force, McLaren has sensationally cracked the holy grail of conspiracy theories: the assassination of John F. Kennedy. By rigorously re-evaluating the evidence, McLaren finally solved the mystery of who killed President Kennedy. Now he's going to bring his formidable skills to a case that has remained a mystery for nearly 20 years: the death of Princess Diana. 3 major investigations in France and Britain have raked over every detail of this case. Yet, after analyzing their results, McLaren discovers some unsettling questions. Was there a mysterious white car in the tunnel at the moment of the accident? Did it cause the crash that killed Diana? How could it then disappear without trace? And crucially, why has it been omitted from the public record?
Detectives don't like unanswered questions. More so, detectives don't like conspiracy theories. My aim is to cut through the theories and to find the truth. To do that, we need to understand what we know so far.
On the evening of August 30th, 1997, Princess Diana and her lover, Dodi Al-Fayed, have dinner at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, owned by his father, billionaire Mohammed Al-Fayed. Just after midnight, they decide to return to Dodi's apartment nearby. There's a pack of paparazzi outside, so to avoid the mob of photographers, Dodi decides to leave the hotel by the back door in a rented car driven by the hotel's head of security. But the paparazzi get wise to it and give chase to the couple's Mercedes-Benz. At 25 minutes past midnight, the Mercedes races into the Alma underpass, where the car veers out of control and crashes. Dodi and the driver are killed instantly, but Diana and her bodyguard survive. 2 witnesses say they saw a white car leave the tunnel right after the crash. Its driver was behaving very suspiciously. Just after 4 a.m. on Sunday, August 31st, 1997, the death of Princess Diana is announced to a stunned world. "10,000 miles away in Melbourne, Australia, McLaren was watching the news of this tragedy in disbelief. Back then, he was a full-time lecturer in crime scene management at the renowned Australian Detective Training School. He couldn't understand the methods of the French police.
The French police arrested 7 paparazzi on charges of manslaughter, so I couldn't understand why they were treating the crash as a simple traffic accident. This was a major crime scene. Yet they dumped the Mercedes-Benz, the key exhibit, on a flatbed tow truck and bounced it through the streets of Paris. All kinds of evidence could have easily fallen off. Then they swept up and hosed down the crime scene and opened it back up to traffic within 4 hours. None of this made any sense according to crime scene principles and procedures.
The death of Princess Diana is deeply felt around the world. 2.5 billion people watch her funeral. It is one of the most watched events in history. While the world grieves, Colin McLaren, frustrated by the actions of the French police, flies to Paris on his own account and applies his expert skills to the crime scene. He spends days meticulously studying the site. Now, nearly 20 years later, after having to wait for 3 exhaustive inquiries in 2 countries to be completed, McLaren can finally begin his own investigation from a base in the heart of Paris. Here, he reviews the evidence gathered by the French and the British, he re-interviews witnesses, and he re-examines the crime scene.
I knew as a detective that you only get one chance at a crime scene, one chance to get everything correct, all a collection of evidence. And to do that, you've got to cordon it off, whether it be for a day or 2, and get it right, because if you don't, it's going to lead to conspiracy theories and crazy notions of what actually happened. And of course, that's what the situation is today.
The Alma underpass is a dangerous construction. Just before the tunnel, an on-ramp merges from the right. Then the road drops sharply down a hill that veers 15 degrees to the left. The French police focus their investigation on a 60-yard section of the road inside the tunnel. When McLaren first analyzed the crime scene, he cast his net much wider to include a large part of the approach road. It paid off. He found new, compelling evidence the police had missed in their hurry to reopen the tunnel. When McLaren tried to share his findings with the French police, they were unreceptive. Soon after the crash, the paparazzi were accused of hounding the princess to her death. So McLaren first turns his sharp eye onto the pack of photographers chasing Diana and Dodi that night. Were any of them driving the mysterious white car? He studies each step of the chase, from the Ritz Hotel to the Alma Tunnel, to try and find the elusive white car.
If we pick it up on this map of Paris, they fly through this side street, across into the Place de la Concorde.
In the Place de la Concorde, the Mercedes has to stop at a red light, which allows the paparazzi to catch up.
The Mercedes-Benz, it's broken away from the lights, swings into the corner here and races at breakneck speed along this fast-moving road. This is the road that takes them through to the Alma Tunnel. Represented on this flow chart up here as we follow the chase.
Witnesses on the road see the Mercedes speeding towards the first underpass.
I saw a Mercedes driving at very high speed. It must have been about 90 miles per hour.
The Mercedes races towards this first tunnel with the paparazzi hot on its tail.
At this point, a few witnesses see that there's 3 paparazzi motorcycles following behind.
Witness Thierry Hackett tells the French cops he saw the whole thing.
Several motorcycles were sitting on the vehicle's tail, trying to get alongside it. Clearly, the driver was being hindered by the motorbikes.
Mohammed Al-Fayed, father of Diana's lover Dodi, is the employer of the Mercedes driver. His former head of PR blames the tragedy squarely on the paparazzi.
What they did was utterly unconscionable. The pursuit was merciless and unending, doing dangerous maneuvers and to try and stop them or slow them down so they could get better pictures.
The first theory is that the paparazzi harassed the Mercedes all the way to the Alma Tunnel, 3/4 of a mile away. Their camera flashes blinded the driver and made him crash.
This is the photograph that the Alfie Ed camp alleged was taken just before the crash. It shows Henri Paul at the wheel and the bodyguard next to him. Diana and Dodie are in the back seat. The problem is there's no sign of any movement in the photograph. No lights reflected in the windscreen. So I don't believe this photograph was actually taken in front of the speeding Mercedes.
It appears the photograph was taken at the back of the Ritz before the Mercedes took off. So perhaps the theory of the blinded driver is one that can be dismissed.
Witnesses say they saw motorbikes surrounding the Mercedes on the chase. And yet, when the police arrested the paparazzi after the crash, they found no photographs of the speeding Mercedes in their cameras. How is that possible?
Trying to work out this puzzle, McLaren now studies some intriguing marks he found at the crime scene just after the crash. Evidence that was missed by the police.
Right here on the roadway, I found 2 parallel skid marks, just over 7 metres long, and they looked very fresh. And of course, my first question was, were they from a Mercedes-Benz? So I measured them, I photographed them, and then I looked for somebody that could help me.
The distance between the wheels is known as the track and can help identify the car. Vincent Messina is an automotive engineer and ABS expert living in the Far East. McLaren sets up a video conference to discuss the detailed measurements he took at the tunnel.
Vincent, you've had a chance to look at the numbers. What's your thoughts?
The Mercedes had a fairly wide track, almost within a millimetre of what you measured, so that's pretty close. With respect to the skid marks, you came up with a measurement of about 46.5 inches. So from that, I was able to deduct that it almost certainly has to be a Mercedes.
The width of the tires and distance between the skid marks makes them a perfect match for the Mercedes-Benz.
Vincent, are you able to work out the speed of the Mercedes when it left the skid mark?
The Mercedes was fitted with early Bosch ABS system. So we know that the skid mark is 7 yards long. We know that once the brake is locked, the Bosch system releases the brake in 150 milliseconds. Now from that data, it works out that it's about, speed-wise, about 104 miles an hour.
So, in order to leave a 7-yard-long skid mark in just 150 milliseconds, the Mercedes has to be doing 104 miles per hour.
Would it have been faster coming into that skid mark?
Yes, a little slightly faster, maybe 110.
$110 miles per hour? At that speed, the Mercedes would have left the paparazzi way behind at the first tunnel. The first 2 paparazzi to arrive at the Alma Tunnel are travelling in a small car with a top speed of 90 miles an hour. The Mercedes, it can do 155 miles an hour. They don't stand a chance keeping up with it. That means that they were nowhere near the Mercedes when it reached the Alma Tunnel, so the paparazzi could not have caused the crash.
Based on this evidence, by the time the Mercedes arrived at the Alma Tunnel, the paparazzi would have been so far back they couldn't have seen who or what caused the accident. None of them saw the mysterious white car either. Laurent Sola, a photographer's agent, represents some of the paparazzi who were chasing Diana that night.
Was your photographers there?
Yes, maybe more a minute later. They were the first people on the first witness. Princess Diana was alive, And I know one of the guys tell, don't worry, madam, we call the emergency people, so stay quiet, don't move.
The paparazzi are then accused of getting in the way of the emergency services trying to save Diana's life. The severity of her injuries meant the slightest delay could make the difference between life and death. To find out how the paparazzi actually behaved, McLaren tracks down the first police officer to arrive at the crash site.
There were maybe 10 photographers. They were not stopping my colleagues from doing the job or paramedics from giving treatment, but they were on the crime scene, so I pushed them away.
So, the paparazzi didn't get in the way of the emergency services, and they didn't cause the crash because they arrived in the tunnel nearly a minute after the accident. Those missing seconds are a black hole in which the Mercedes brakes violently. No one knows why. The car then goes completely out of control and crashes into the 13th pillar inside the tunnel. Conspiracy theories claim this is when the elusive white car enters the frame.
Like everybody else, I thought this event, this terrible tragedy in Paris, was the most appalling accident. What else could it be? But very, very soon, things started happening which made me believe, however reluctantly, that there was some sort of conspiracy, some sort of cover-up going on.
Detective Colin McLaren's new evidence reveals that the photographers chasing Princess Diana couldn't have caused the crash that killed her. But he still wants to understand who instigated the dangerous high-speed chase. Was the mysterious white car involved?
Certainly the paparazzi were intrusive. There's no doubt they were annoying, and Diana was used to that. But what turned these pesky photographers into raging wolves?
Diana was the most photographed woman on Earth. As the young, beautiful wife of the next King of England and mother to his successor, Prince William, for millions of people, Diana embodied the idea of a fairy tale princess. People couldn't get enough of her.
What is the obsession all about with Diana?
She had something about her that related to ordinary people. It was part Hollywood, part soap, but there was more to it too. The issues she got involved with, somehow she resonated with people around the world.
Then the fairy tale shatters. Prince Charles is having a long-term affair with a married woman, Camilla Parker Bowles. Diana and Charles are divorced in 1996, but Diana's star does not dim.
Diana was the big story because every time magazines and newspapers put her picture on their covers, they sold out.
McLaren now discovers it's one of those front-page photographs that sets off a chain reaction that ends in the fatal crash in the Alma Tunnel. The summer of 1997 is a busy time for Diana. Mohammed Al Fayed, the owner of the Paris Ritz and Harrods department store in London, invites her and her children to holiday with him in the south of France. He then summons his eldest son, Dodi, to come and entertain the princess. Dodi Al Fayed is 42 at the time. With his father's backing, he's become a movie producer. When Mohammed calls, Dodi's in Paris with his fiancée, Kelly Fisher. They are soon to be married. But his father's summons are not to be ignored. Dodi abandons Kelly in Paris and flies down to Saint-Tropez. Diana and the young princes have a fun vacation. It is also a great success for Mohammed Al Fayed because Diana and Dodi really hit it off. So much so that after taking the boys home, Diana returns to the south of France 2 more times that summer to spend time alone with Dodi. He reportedly leaves it up to his father, Mohammed, to tell his fiancée that the engagement is over and she should never call again. With the scent of a new romance in the air, the paparazzi follow their every move. Then, one photographer hits the jackpot. He takes a picture that sets the world media on fire. It's of Dodi and Diana kissing.
On previous occasions, the Diana I knew would have gone into overdrive to get the story killed. Something about this suggested to me that she didn't mind.
There's a reason Diana doesn't object to the photo. Her boyfriend of 2 years, Dr. Hasnat Khan, has recently split up with her. The pressure of dating the most famous woman on earth became too much for the unassuming doctor.
The pictures of Diana and Dodi on the boat were supposed to be, clandestine pictures, but they weren't because they were very well arranged and organised by Diana herself. She wanted to make Hasnat Khan terribly jealous.
Do you think she still loved him?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Diana was criticized for complaining about the press, when in fact she often used them to her own advantage.
Many people did see her as someone who had used the press when it suited her. The irony, of course, is that the same people who would criticize her couldn't read enough about her, couldn't see enough pictures about her.
Before her romance with Dodi, Diana's relationship with the paparazzi is one of mutual benefit. They make money out of her, but their pictures help maintain her super celebrity status, which in turn benefits the causes she champions. After the kiss, her relationship with the press changes dramatically.
That famous picture reputedly sold for £1 million and possibly even more. It was the picture every photographer who followed the royal family had dreamt about getting. You just wanted a picture of Diana with a new man.
That photograph started the press pursuit, the paparazzi pursuit.
The picture of the kiss is a major turning point in the story. It was sold for over $1.5 million. It becomes a game change in the relationship between Diana and the paparazzi. They all want the next $1 million photo. And for that kind of money, they're prepared to do just about anything. We now understand the motive for the car chase.
Adding to the frenzy unleashed by the kiss, another photo appears that raises speculation to fever pitch. Is Diana pregnant by Dodi? Will she marry him? When the holidays are over, Diana and Dodi return to Paris and spend the afternoon at his father's hotel, the Ritz. Security cameras show the paparazzi begin to gather outside. They can't afford to miss a single moment chasing the golden couple. There could be another kiss, a ring, an announcement. A photographer in the right place at the right time could make a lot of money.
So on that last night in Paris, we have a dangerous situation. On one side, we have Mohammed Al Fayed. He's very keen on a match between his son and Diana, as this would elevate him to the membership of the British elite. And on the other side, we have the paparazzi, and they're all desperate for the next $1 million photograph. And in the middle sits Diana, and she's on a rebound from a failed relationship, allowing herself to be comforted by Dodi, who obeys his father and dumps his own fiancée to romance the princess.
That night, Dodi books a table in a restaurant, but the paparazzi won't leave them alone, so they take refuge back at the Ritz. Yet even there, their dinner does not go smoothly. Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodi's bodyguard, was at the Ritz at that time. In his biography, he says Diana left the dining room in tears just after 10 p.m. Doty's team are standing by to take the couple back to his apartment. Then, just before midnight, Doty announces that they'll be leaving from the back door of the Ritz in a hired car to avoid the hungry pack of paparazzi. He tells them to use the cars out front as decoys for the photographers. The bodyguards don't like this plan. If the couple travel in only one car, they'll have no backup should anything go wrong.
This is the second big turning point in the story. Doty's decision has a domino effect that will have fatal consequences. So the big question is, why does he change his plans at the very last minute? Doty's security team are well-trained professionals who know how to keep the paparazzi at arm's length. What difference would a few more photographs have made when Diana has already gone public with her affair with Doty? Perhaps Doty wanted to show Diana that he was his own man and he would go against his father's wishes by leaving from the back door so no pictures could be taken of himself and the princess in front of the Ritz.
In his biography, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones says that Doty claimed his father had given him permission to change the departure plans. Al-Fayed has since denied this. At 17 minutes past midnight, a Mercedes-Benz S280 sedan pulls up at the rear of the hotel. A few photographers watching the back doors see Diana and Doty get in the car and race away.
My photographer saw him leaving very, very fast.
The paparazzi at the front of the hotel hear the couple have left and give chase. The hunt is on. So far, there's no evidence of a white car among the pack of photographers. Then, a few minutes later, the Mercedes-Benz brakes violently. What happens next has fueled conspiracy theories for nearly 20 years. Renowned detective Colin McLaren is searching for the truth about the death of Princess Diana. He knows that the Mercedes outran the paparazzi long before it reached the Alma underpass. Yet just outside the tunnel, it is forced to brake hard. None of the investigations so far have explained why. McLaren now reviews witness statements taken during the French investigation. No one saw what made the Mercedes brake so suddenly, though some did see it crash into the 13th pillar.
As I drove through the Alma tunnel, I saw through the pillars between the carriageways, the Mercedes crash into the pillar.
I heard a screeching of tires behind me and saw through my rearview mirror the Mercedes enter the tunnel. It was skidding at an angle of 45 degrees. Then it straightened up and I heard a loud noise. And then I saw the car hitting the median.
What's interesting about Majadi's story is that he hears the screeching of tyres before the Mercedes enters the tunnel. That must be the braking that certain witnesses talked about in this area here, and also must be related to the 7-yard-long skid marks that I found.
Other witnesses only heard the accident.
I heard a big noise and a loud screeching of tyres. And then finally a second very loud impact.
None of these witnesses saw what made the Mercedes brake so suddenly or what made it crash. None of them saw a small white car entering the tunnel, though 2 people did see it racing out of the underpass just after the crash. It had dents and scrapes on it. The police have been unable to trace it. The press and the public are quick to make up their own explanations for what happened. The first conspiracy theory appears within 2 hours of the crash. Soon there are over 36,000 websites saying the fatal accident was the result of a sinister plot. The plot thickens when some claim the video from traffic cameras along the road has been destroyed or withheld.
The issue of the missing traffic camera images is curious. There are 10 traffic cameras between the Ritz Hotel and the Alma Tunnel. And yet when police check these cameras, they are amazed. There's no images of the Mercedes anywhere along the route from the hotel to the tunnel. None of the cameras recorded a single image. How is that possible in a modern European city?
In France, there are strict privacy laws governing cameras in public places. Those situated between the Ritz and the Alma Tunnel focus exclusively on private businesses and residences. There is one traffic camera inside the tunnel, but it was not working on the night of the accident.
It was inexplicable unless you look at it as some form of conspiracy.
Mohammed Al-Fayed has no doubt it's a conspiracy, and the lack of traffic camera evidence is proof of a cover-up. He claims Diana and Dodi were murdered by the British Secret Service because she was pregnant with Dodi's child, and they were going to get married.
Mohammed felt that the British establishment would never allow the mother of the future king to marry his son.
The British upper class never accepted Mohammed Al-Fayed, and they don't like him taking control of Harrods department store.
Despite his ownership of the iconic Harrods of Knightsbridge, Mohammed was never able to endear himself to the British inner circle. Indeed, he was constantly denied a passport.
Adding to this insult, Prince Philip removes the royal seals from the Harrods store. Now, days after the crash, Al-Fayed reveals that Diana had told him Prince Philip had threatened her.
Philip had a very, very difficult relationship with Diana. He did not like her.
Why not?
Well, because he thought, with Charles having an affair with Camilla, that Diana should grin and bear it, as it were. But she's not that sort of person. So she had an affair with James Hewitt. Philip called her all sorts of names, really nasty, disgusting names. And she was so upset.
Al-Fayed now ramps up his vengeance.
He made it very public that he felt that the royal family, in particular Prince Philip, and the security services are behind this whole, if you like, conspiracy.
Al-Fayed's accusations defy credibility. But then an astonishing document comes to light. It's a record of a conversation between Diana and Lord Mishcon, a distinguished lawyer. She told him she was sure the royal family wanted to get rid of her. McLaren finds the document in the National Archives.
Incredibly, Diana predicted a car accident arranged by the royal family. Mishcon made a note of the conversation, and it's dated October 1995, 2 years before the actual death of Diana. Her Royal Highness said that she had been informed by reliable sources efforts would be made, inverted commas, be it by some accident in her car such as pre-prepared brake failure or whatever, then at least to see that she is so injured or damaged as to be declared unbalanced.
These allegations may seem ludicrous, but behind them lies a very real conflict between Diana and the UK government. Diana's campaign for the worldwide ban of landmines is gaining international support. This is a serious irritation to the British defense industry.
She was seen as a threat because, of course, the British arms trade is up there in the top 3 in the world.
I am committed to supporting, in whatever way I can, the international campaign to outlaw these dreadful weapons.
What they don't want is somebody going around the world undermining the munitions industry. People make money out of landmines, big money.
One member of parliament makes it clear that Diana's interventions are unwelcome.
The government's policy on landmines has been an extremely careful one, and the statements made by the Princess of Wales have not been in line with that policy.
There's a whole group of people there who are not very keen on Diana's political motivations. She's a loose cannon, and why doesn't she stay out of things about which she knows nothing? They want to close her down.
So on one hand, we have Diana telling people that the royal family were going to get rid of her by staging a car accident. And then on the other hand, you've got Mohammed Al Fayed after the accident claiming that's just what happened. Could you really engineer such an accident?
If Diana was costing defense companies millions of dollars in export sales, it is conceivable that someone might have decided to stop her.
Who is it who really did feel the threat was so great that something had to be done? I do not believe it was an accident, and neither did the inquest jury.
The skid marks now look very sinister. McLaren reviews statements from witnesses who say they saw things in the tunnel that could be seen as a deliberate attack. Francois Levistre was driving out of the tunnel that night when he saw something alarming in his rearview mirror.
I could see a vehicle surrounded by motorbikes. One of the motorbikes cut across the front of the Mercedes. There was a big white flash and the car started to zigzag. Then it crashed. I thought it could be an assassination or a gangland hit. I carried on driving as I did not want any trouble.
Another witness in a vehicle some way behind the Mercedes sees something very similar.
There was an intense flash of light, followed by something hitting something, a bang, and then screeching.
If the Mercedes was able to brake that hard, obviously the brakes are in good condition. Therefore, that rules out Diana's fears that her brakes would be tampered with to cause her to crash.
But Diana's anxiety that the royal family would try to get rid of her by disabling her brakes is taken very seriously by the British authorities. When the police conduct their investigation, they thoroughly check the Mercedes for any sign of malicious damage.
I was looking at all the mechanical items, the brakes, the steering, and wheels and tyres to see whether there was anything likely to have been tampered with, and I found absolutely no evidence of that.
We had witnesses describing a blinding, flashing light inside the tunnel. Another saying this accident was like an assassination, a gangland hit. It was all starting to sound a bit dramatic, a bit Hollywood.
The fanciful plot becomes chillingly real when an ex-spy comes forward to testify. Investigating the car accident that killed Princess Diana in 1997, Detective Colin McLaren finds reports of a bright flash of light that blinded the driver of her car and made him crash. It sounds like a movie stunt until an ex-spy speaks up.
Richard Tomlinson was an agent with the British Security Services. He discovered a plan to kill Slobodan Milosevic in a tunnel with vehicles driving at speed and a flash to blind the driver. At the inquest, they admitted that such a plan was produced, but it was never proceeded with.
If, as Mohammed Al Fayed claims, the British Secret Service killed Diana, it would be very unlikely they would use a method that they've already rejected. So what was the bright light that people saw inside the tunnel?
There would have been lots of flashing of light, because this vehicle had its headlights on, crashed up into the pillar and spun around, so there would have been light all over the place.
Another witness claims he saw the Mercedes boxed in by two sinister vehicles.
I noticed two cars and a motorbike following one another very closely and at very high speed. The first car was dark color, the second vehicle was a black Mercedes.
The French police identified and interviewed the drivers of the car and motorcycle seen by Benoit Bourrat. The owner of the dark car told police he saw the Mercedes racing into the tunnel behind him. He was afraid it would crash into him, so he accelerated away from it. The motorcycle rider stated that he called the emergency services and then tried to help Diana. His story was found to be a complete fabrication, and he was eliminated from the investigation. McLaren now takes stock. If the paparazzi didn't cause the fatal accident, and the conspiracy theories don't stack up, who or what is responsible for the crash that killed Princess Diana? The mysterious white car seen leaving the crime scene remains a troubling puzzle, which no one has yet solved.
The great majority of crimes have a simple explanation. Here we have Diana, who might have irritated a couple of arms dealers and fallen out with her in-laws. She feels used by them. Then while she's having a romantic evening with her new lover in Paris, she gets upset. She's even seen to cry. Dodie, who depends entirely on his father's money, wants to show Diana that he's in charge and makes a simple yet very bad decision to leave via the back door of the Ritz. Then he makes a monumental decision. He tells Henri Paul to drive the Mercedes.
Henri Paul has been at the Ritz for 10 years and has risen to the position of deputy head of security. He is a trusted employee of Mohammed Al-Fayed. So when Dodie comes up with his plan to leave in a hired Mercedes from the back of the Ritz, he doesn't hesitate to ask Paul to drive the car. Yet just 1 week after the accident, a British newspaper accuses Henri Paul of being responsible for killing Princess Diana. Al-Fayed immediately gets his head of security to implicate the French Secret Service in the plot to murder Dodie and Diana.
The headline was produced before Henri Paul's body samples had even been analysed. And that was leaked by the French security services.
Yet when the results of Henri Paul's blood tests are made public, they confirm the sensational headline.
The French limit is 50 milligrams per decilitre, and the concentration recorded of alcohol in Henri Paul were 174 milligrams per decilitre. So over 3 times the French legal limit for driving.
Henri Paul is 3.5 times over the limit, yet no one appears to notice.
There's a video as well of him walking normally, talking to both Princess Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed, and they didn't get any impression that he was drunk at that time, or I don't think they would have got into the car with him.
Henri Paul's friends and family swear he was not a heavy drinker.
Il avait une consommation normale.
He had the normal consumption of alcohol. We met very frequently, and I never saw him drunk.
Je ne l'ai jamais vu ivre.
A startling piece of information then comes to light that supports Al-Fayed's claim that the driver's blood samples were switched. Henri Paul's doctor testifies that he suffered from depression and was worried about drinking too much. So she prescribed the antidepressant Prozac and a drug to combat alcohol addiction. He was taking both drugs on the night of the crash.
Interestingly, if we take the blood sample, which I say probably was switched, there's no prescription drugs in there. So it's not his blood because it didn't have any of those drugs in it.
Could the blood samples really have been switched? The French investigators discovered that the pathologist who took those samples didn't bother to label them. They were left unmarked in a fridge to be labelled by someone else the next day. So I suppose they could have been switched. My question is, why would anybody switch Henri Paul's blood samples? Al-Fayed claims it was done to show that his driver was drunk, because if he was, it would provide the British Secret Service with the perfect cover for the murder.
In the face of these accusations, the French authorities order new tests of Henri Paul's blood. The first tests didn't check for drugs. This time they do. The results are explosive.
The second blood tests proved that Henri Paul was 3.5 times over the alcohol limit, and he was on prescription drugs, a fatal cocktail for driving a car at any speed. But now Al-Fayed changes his strategy. He turns against his trusted employee and accuses him of being an informer for British and French intelligence.
Al-Fayed claims it was Henri Paul who persuaded his son to leave from the rear entrance of the Ritz and to take the road through the Alma Tunnel where Dodi and Diana could be murdered. But hotel staff testify that Dodi first informed another employee that he planned to leave by the back door, and that this other employee should only notify Henri Paul of this plan. Which shows that Henri Paul knew nothing of the new plan before that time. It's also very unlikely that Henri Paul, who's not a professional driver, would take part in a plot in which he could be killed. Al-Fayed's allegations don't stack up, but McLaren can't ignore them until he solves the questions that still plague this case. What happened to the enigmatic white car? Why has it never been found? Answering those questions leads McLaren to an even greater mystery. Renowned detective Colin McLaren has found fresh and startling information that sheds new light into the death of Princess Diana. Al-Fayed now blames his employee, Henri Paul, of being a spy and conspiring to assassinate Diana and Dodi.
Henri Paul's motives during that last day are far simpler to understand than Mohammed Al-Fayed's Hollywood-inspired murder plot. Henri had been working at the Hotel Ritz for 10 years. He'd risen to the position of deputy head of security. His immediate boss had retired, and therefore Henri was chasing the top job. Simple ambition, really, explains much of his behaviour that last day, that last night in Paris.
When Dodi, Diana, and their entourage return to Paris at the end of their holiday, the paparazzi are waiting. The party is collected from the airport by 2 cars from the Ritz. One of them is driven by Henri Paul, who outruns the photographers to impress Dodi. But one of his passengers is not impressed.
Henri Paul almost killed us, honest to God. He was driving like a maniac through the traffic. I still don't understand what we were trying to outrun.
At 7 p.m., Henri Paul goes off duty and leaves the hotel. He lives only a few minutes away.
This is Henri's favourite watering hole, and it's only about 100 yards from where he used to live. And we found out that on that particular night, he popped in here for a drink.
Paul is seen drinking at the bar, though no one knows how many drinks he may have had. Later that evening, he receives a phone call. Dodi and Diana have returned unexpectedly to the Ritz.
We now know that Henri Paul was off duty having drinks at a bar, but he wants to impress Dodi, so returns to the Ritz Hotel. He's seen later that evening inside the bar at the Ritz, drinking pastis, a very strong drink, similar, I guess, to whiskey. But when you put water with it, it turns into a pineapple colour. But people at the bar don't know he's actually drinking hard liquor. With him drinking 2 glasses of Ricard, is that consistent with 174?
2 Ricards should not have given them that concentration at that time because some have been metabolised and used up. So the time he was driving, I would have expected him to be below the legal limit.
So 174 would indicate that he's consumed a lot more liquor?
Yes, it would suggest he had either drunk covertly while he was at the Ritz or had drunk before he came back to the Ritz that evening.
Henri Paul has had a lot to drink, yet is able to appear sober to those around him.
Alcoholics can tolerate massive amounts of alcohol, so a value of 174 would lay me out, but for an alcoholic, they could function quite normally.
Even if Henri Paul was a seasoned drinker and was able to function with high levels of alcohol in his system, why didn't somebody around him smell it on his breath that night?
In his book, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones says that when Henri Paul joined him in the hotel bar, he was smoking a small, pungent cigar. Other witnesses say he was smoking constantly that night. That would have masked the smell of alcohol on his breath. At this point in the evening, the Al Fayed bodyguards and drivers are awaiting instructions to take the couple back to Dodi's apartment, where they will stay the night.
The bodyguards have a well-honed procedure for moving Diana and Dodi around. The couple travel in one vehicle with an expert driver, while the two bodyguards travel in another close behind. It works.
But at 10:30 that night, the bodyguards receive a message that sets alarm bells ringing. He and Diana will return to the apartment, leaving the hotel via the rear entrance. The two vehicles out front will be used as decoys to distract the paparazzi. The bodyguards are not happy with this change of plan. It means there is no close protection or backup vehicle should anything happen. And Dodi replaces the professional driver with the drunken Henri Paul.
Henri Paul must have thought he'd secured the top job. He'd gained Dodi's confidence.
But then Paul starts to behave strangely. The normally quiet, shy man goes outside and starts taunting the paparazzi.
He said to them something like, don't try to follow us because you won't catch us.
One of the guys said, of course, Henri Paul was drunk.
The blood samples showed Henri Paul was over the limit. His behavior now shows he was losing control. Just after midnight, a Mercedes-Benz S280 sedan pulls up outside the hotel's rear entrance. Seconds later, Dodi, Diana, Henri Paul, and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones go out to the car.
This plan was always flawed. It was designed by a man who was trying to impress his princess. And we know Henri Paul had been drinking throughout the day, thinking they're out gunning the paparazzi. They race off into the night at an extraordinary speed without seatbelts.
A moment later, the paparazzi are on their tail. They catch up with the Mercedes at a red light on Place de la Concorde.
Here we are at the Place de la Concorde, and this really is where the race begins between the Mercedes and the paparazzi's motorcycles. Henri Paul catches a green and charges off. He's heading for the fast-moving Cours Albert.
Witnesses testify that Henri Paul turns into the fast divided highway with squealing tires and doing 80 to 90 miles per hour. This road will take him straight to the Alma Tunnel.
Henri Paul's now got two tunnels to negotiate. Both are very dangerous. The first one, right behind me, has a very sharp decline and then a little lift. This will help his speed.
The paparazzi testify that by the time they arrive at the first underpass, they've lost sight of the Mercedes.
The Mercedes S-Class 280 sedan is capable of considerable speed. It's also engineered for a smooth, quiet ride. Perhaps it was that engineering that fooled Henri Paul that day. Perhaps he didn't realise how fast he was going.
Miraculously, Henri Paul has cleared the first underpass without incident. Now the Alma Tunnel, a far more dangerous construction, is racing towards him.
This is like a twisted gun barrel. Henri Paul has got to clear that as the pack of wolves behind him are charging forward. Unfortunately for Henri Paul, this road carries warning signs everywhere, a maximum of 30 miles an hour when he's doing about 120 miles an hour.
Pressed for time to reopen the busy thoroughfare, the French police focus on a 60-yard section of the road inside the tunnel.
Why did they restrict their investigation to just inside the tunnel? And why did they reopen the tunnel to traffic so soon after the crash? I was certain vital evidence had been missed. As it turns out, I was correct.
As forensic investigators process the crash site, a bystander hands them an orange piece of plastic they found on the ground.
It was a part of a real light, but at the beginning, we cannot know if it was for this accident or for another.
That small piece of plastic will dramatically change the investigation and help unlock the mystery of the missing white car. A fragment of a car's taillight found near the crash site gives Detective Colin McLaren a vital clue that will reveal the real cause of the crash that killed Princess Diana. Police then find a rear-view mirror near the taillight fragments. It belongs to the Mercedes, and it holds an intriguing clue.
They found the right mirror of the Mercedes with a little smear of white paint. We have a lot of traces. On the right of the Mercedes, we have a small smear, and after we have a long smear too. It demonstrated that we have a contact on the entrance of the tunnel between this Mercedes and another car.
The Mercedes collided with another car, a white car. This is the piece of the puzzle that the skid marks and tire residue McLaren found have been pointing to all along. Colonel Turon tells McLaren that his team spent days trying to work out what car the white paint came from. Finally, they had a breakthrough.
We have a method to analyze each chip of paint. With infrared spectroscopy, you obtain a spectra. We compare this spectra that we obtain with all the data of the spectra of paint of cars that we have in our lab. And we have the proposition that it was of the Bianco Corfu 224.
Turon then discovers that this particular white paint is only used by one car manufacturer.
This paint was served only for Fiat Uno, so meant to identify Fiat Uno.
The white paint, called Bianco Corfu 224, was used only on Fiat Unos made between 1983 and 1987. That helps the police narrow down the search for the car. The French police now provide a diagram illustrating what they believe happened that night. As the Mercedes raced towards the Alma underpass, a slow-moving white Fiat Uno joined the road up ahead from the on-ramp. No witnesses saw it on the road before then. It then moved down the hill into the tunnel, where Henri Paul caught up with it. He tried to avoid it, but going too fast and impaired by drink and drugs, he misjudged and scraped the side of the Fiat, losing his right side rearview mirror. The police believe the collision happened where the mirror and tail light fragments were found, about 8 yards inside the tunnel.
If we position a Fiat Uno near the wall, and near this Fiat Uno, we position a Mercedes, and with a laser, we point the direction, the certain pillar. It was a straight line between this point at the entrance and the pillar.
This doesn't make sense to McLaren. At that point, the Mercedes must be doing 70 to 80 miles per hour. Inertia would carry the side rearview mirror and taillight pieces a long way further into the tunnel. The collision debris was found about 8 yards inside the tunnel, which means that the collision must have happened quite some way before that. Does this finally explain the mysterious skid marks at the top of the hill?
I believe the Mercedes and the Fiat collided here. This is 60 yards before the tunnel. This is where I found the skid marks. From here, using the forensic principle that every contact leaves its trace, I've plotted step by step what happened to the car that was carrying Diana.
McLaren has worked out what the Mercedes did in those missing seconds between leaving the paparazzi behind and its fatal end in the Alma tunnel. But what made Henri Paul lose control of the car outside the tunnel? Vincent Messina now gives McLaren the final piece to the puzzle.
What does those skid marks tell you in reference to that on-ramp?
There's a bulge towards the end of the skid mark, and it swerves a little bit, which means that something must have upset the vehicle whilst it was in the middle of that skid.
Do you think that a light vehicle could have actually been responsible for that fluctuation in the skid mark?
Sure. If it was a heavy vehicle or a truck, then you'd have a massive change in the skid marks. So there must have been a lighter vehicle, yes.
A light vehicle, like the Fiat Uno. This is where the elusive white car enters the frame. From the on-ramp on the right, Henri Paul slams on the brakes, but at over 100 miles per hour, after 7 yards, the ABS system unlocks them. He tries to avoid the Fiat, but clips its rear left taillight and scrapes along its side. Under the influence of drink and drugs, the smallest collision makes him lose control. He misses the bend in the road and rockets straight ahead. Directly in front of him is a wall. What happens next is incredible.
Within the first hour of my arrival on that first day in Paris, back in 1997, I discovered this particular marking here on the side of this concrete capping. It's tyre residue from here to here. It looked as if it was just placed there a short time earlier. When you rubbed your hand along the black tyre residue itself, little particles of rubber just fell to the ground. That tells me it hadn't suffered any rain yet. But the question is, what was this rubber doing over 1 yard above the road surface? Are you able to say, when you look back at the skid mark and then you look at the tyre residue on the capping, is there any possible relationship between the two?
If you gun sight the skid marks, it goes straight to that capping. So I'd say more than likely that would have been the actual contact with the vehicle.
But the vehicle or the contact is well over 1 yard off the road surface. It's quite high up in the air.
The drop into that tunnel is quite significant. If you're doing 110 miles an hour at that point in the road where the skid marks were located, that car would have left the roadway completely, would have been airborne for quite a distance.
But the car would have weighed approximately 2 tonnes.
I think anyone who's driven a car at speed understands how light they become. The faster you go, the lighter the car becomes, because the air goes underneath the vehicle and starts to lift it up.
So you're quite convinced it was airborne for a time?
Yes.
Coming out of the skid marks, the Mercedes is traveling at 104 miles per hour when it goes over the ridge of the hill. Even if it is airborne for only half a second, at that speed, that car will cover over 70 feet. And the wall is closer than that. McLaren now wants to check what he's learned so far with someone who knows how cars behave at speed. Ben Collins is a racing and stunt driver with over 20 years' experience of life in the very fast lane. He's a stunt double for James Bond in the 007 films and is famous for being in the hugely successful BBC TV show, Top Gear.
If the tyres are not physically airborne, there's no way to control the speed, and you've got a direct line here straight into the wall.
Moving at a gut-wrenching speed, it takes only a second for the Mercedes to go from the roadway to the wall, its wheels tearing at the parapet.
Just forward by 3 metres of the tyre residue, I found some fresh, deep gouges on the side of the capping, going in a east-west direction, consistent with something hitting it on the way through.
Unable to get a grip on the wall, the car crashes to the ground.
And here at the bottom on the road surface, they are east-west gouges and also scallop marks, semicircular marks, indicating to me a wheel rim had hit it. This right-hand tyre, it was the only tyre that had a tear or a cut in it. Yeah. Probably 3 or 4 inches long.
Yeah.
What does that tell you with regard to this accident?
Well, given how hard it's clearly hit these two things here, it's amazing that the wheel has stayed on. But it's an extremely strong car, so Likelihood is that one of these sharp edges has done the cutting. Those sharp curbstones will cut a tyre on impact.
After bouncing off the retaining wall and crashing back down onto the road, the Mercedes is still traveling way too fast.
Whatever speed you go in off this ramp here, that speed's going to be unabated pretty much until you get to the bottom. You might shed, 10, 15 miles an hour from some of these impacts, but the angle is quite oblique, so it's just not enough.
Henri Paul is desperately trying to regain control of the car, but with a wrecked front wheel, that's very difficult. The Mercedes hurtles across the road at 60 to 70 miles per hour. Its fate has been sealed. As to the fate of the Fiat Uno, McLaren now uncovers an extraordinary puzzle. Detective Colin McLaren has worked out why the Mercedes carrying Princess Diana had to brake so violently as it approached the Alma Tunnel. A white Fiat joined the road just ahead of it. Henri Paul, doing over 100 miles per hour, hits it and completely loses control of the car.
There's probably a handful of people in the world that would be able to get out of it, because even without taking evasive action and having to stamp the brake pedal and swivel the steering wheel, there would be a rampant weight transfer and you'd be struggling to control it.
The Mercedes hits the 13th pillar, then ricochets across the road and slams into the tunnel wall, where it comes to rest facing the way it came. The white Fiat Uno then disappears from the tunnel, leaving a host of unanswered questions and prompting a massive search for it. Mohammed Al-Fayed claims the disappearance of the Fiat is proof that it was used by the British Secret Service to cause the crash that killed Diana and Dodi.
1 million sterling going to be declared next week for any person can guide or give evidence to help find who been in charge of the Fiat.
It's becoming obvious that Al-Fayed is seizing on anything that would further his conspiracy theories. My original thoughts was that of a grieving father. He was lashing out at enemies, and I understood that. But now I was starting to think there was something very different going on here.
McLaren asks Christian Courtil, the French lawyer who represented bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones in the French investigation, why a successful businessman like Mohammed Al-Fayed believes and pursues such conspiracy arguments.
One reason would probably be that he wanted to shift liability from the possibility of seeing the Ritz prosecuted. You cannot be the owner of the hotel, the owner of a car company, the head of security of the hotel, and be liable for nothing.
So would you think liability or responsibility is on the hands of the person that created the alternate plan that night?
The responsibility to me is in the hands of the hotel. They knew, of course, who they were lodging, and they knew how security was to be established. And the car company should not have let the car driven by a drunken, unlicensed person. When an employee commits a crime or is liable for anything, the company is, and the owner of the company is.
However incredible the conspiracy theories sound, the police cannot dismiss Al-Fayed's allegations that the Fiat is part of a sinister plot without speaking to its driver. But the car has vanished without trace. And finding it won't be easy. There are literally thousands of Fiat Unos in Paris, and the police only know that the car is white and made between 1983 and 1987. They face a monumental task. Police telephone records then reveal an extraordinary lead. Among the hundreds of calls they received after the tragedy, one caller mentions a white Fiat Uno she and her husband saw leaving the tunnel on the night of the accident. Colin McLaren tracks her down in Paris. Sabine Dozon's first statement was discounted by the French police. But McLaren suspects that her evidence is the key to this whole mystery.
I understand you might have been in Paris.
Yes, we were in Paris.
If you could just show me on the map where you saw the white Fiat.
Yes, we just had a dinner on this side, on the left bank, and we crossed the bridge de l'Alma, a little bit after midnight. And just at that point, at the end of the tunnel, we met the Fiat Uno.
Coming up behind the Fiat, Sabine quickly realizes there's something wrong with its driver.
He was zigzagging. We thought he was drunk.
Sabine's mother has a white Fiat Uno, so she took particular notice of the car.
When I looked at the car, there were a bump on the car and a scratch on the paint of the car.
As Sabine and her husband overtake the erratic Fiat, they both take a good look at the driver.
He was small, with short black hair and a tan skin. He was looking in his mirror like something upset him, you know? He was like this and trying to see in the back.
Did he look calm, or did he look drunk or agitated, or can you think
No, agitated. And on the back of the seats, there were a dog, a big dog, and he was having a muzzle, an orange muzzle.
French license plates identify where a vehicle is registered. Sabine recalls that it was a Paris number.
I remember the license number is 92 or 78, some department like this.
Do you feel certain it was a Parisian car?
Yes, I knew it was a Parisian car.
That's very good.
4,500 Fiat Unos are registered in those two Paris departments. The police begin the laborious search. The Fiat's driver must be found.
The bodyguard survived the crash but suffered severe head injuries and doesn't remember anything. So the driver of the Fiat is the only person who really knows what happened in the tunnel that night. A major hunt is launched to find him, to finally put all the conspiracy theories to rest.
Weeks go by, and the police draw a blank. Then, one day, a man walks into a Paris police station.
A 22-year-old Vietnamese Frenchman named Mr. Lee Van Tan. He was there to pay for a traffic fine related to his white Fiat Uno. But the car at the front of the police station was now red.
Every other detail of this car matches those of the white Fiat the police are hunting for. They interview Lee Van Tan. He signs a statement saying that on the night of the crash, he was working as a security guard outside Paris. He also says that he painted his car red 2 to 3 months before that night. Lee Van Tan's statement is of great interest to McLaren for another reason. Back in 1997, he found bumper residue on the wall of the divided highway. It's a vital piece of circumstantial evidence because in his statement, Lee Van says that he changed the 2 bumpers of his car, suggesting that they might have been damaged.
Police raided the house of Mr. Van Tan and they found 2 guard dogs, black and tan, with muzzles. Witness Sabine Dussault recalls the white Fiat leaving the tunnel that night, and in the back seat of the Fiat Uno was a dog, black and tan, with a muzzle.
But it isn't just the dogs that match Sabine's recollection. Lee Van himself also fits her description of the driver. And his father, Francois, when interviewed years later by the press, appears to implicate his son even further.
I do not want to believe that he was in the tunnel that night, but I know as a father that he has said things which just do not add up. He behaved very strangely at the time, and has behaved strangely since. What I do know is that the Fiat was repainted only a few hours after the crash which killed Princess Diana.
Lee Van later admits he was driving his car in Paris on the night of the accident, but he insists he was nowhere near the Alma Tunnel, though he cannot remember where he went or who he saw. The police seize the Fiat and have it analyzed by their forensic experts.
So you saw the car yourself?
Yes. Under the red paint, we found very quickly the white original coat of the paint.
Do you know if you made an analysis or examination on the left-hand side of this red car?
What I remember is that I analyzed on the rear of this car.
Rear of the car.
Rear of the car, not in the front. Because why? I don't remember. Because I remember that there is some deformation. I don't remember exactly, but for the memory I have, it was not compatible with the accident of the Mercedes.
I asked him if he'd analysed the left-hand side of Lee Van Tan's Fiat, and he said he'd analysed the rear end of the vehicle, which doesn't make sense to me. If the Mercedes right-hand rear-view mirror and right front panel had the Fiat's paint on it, why wouldn't you analyse the left side of the Fiat?
The police then point out that the original 1980s taillight lens is still in place on Lee Van Tan's Fiat. They say that if this was the car in the tunnel, it would have been replaced. Based on this, and not being able to find the right bumps and scrapes on the Fiat, Lee Van Tan is eliminated from the investigation.
Then, something very telling happens. After eliminating Lee Van Tan, the French authorities stop searching for the car and its driver, and no reason is given.
McLaren wonders whether the reason they stopped searching is because they found the white Fiat they were looking for. But if that's the case, why is it eliminated from the investigation? This now becomes the toughest question of all. Detective Colin McLaren has shown that the Mercedes carrying Princess Diana collides with a white Fiat Uno outside the tunnel. The Mercedes then goes completely out of control and crashes. And the Fiat vanishes. 5 years after the French inquiry, the British Metropolitan Police launches an in-depth investigation into the conspiracy theories surrounding the death of Princess Diana. It's called Operation Paget.
And I decided that only a thorough and detailed investigation would answer these extremely serious allegations.
Lee Van Tan refuses to give evidence, and the British authorities cannot force a foreign citizen to do so. Sabine Dozon and her husband both give sworn testimony at the High Court of England that Lee Van Tan was the driver of the white Fiat Uno they saw.
The French police eliminated Lee Van Tan's Fiat from the inquiry. They claimed damage to the rear of the Fiat wasn't part of the accident. Operation Paget called in global forensic experts LGC to review the French evidence. They found that the French analysis of the car's paint, damage and taillight was not conclusive to eliminate the Fiat. These doubts are crucial for me to assess this accident.
4 years and $10 million later, Operation Paget concludes that there is absolutely no proof of any conspiracy to harm Princess Diana.
There was no conspiracy to murder any occupants of that car. This was a tragic accident.
Before Operation Paget has finished its report, a third investigation begins into the crash in the Alma Tunnel. The British coroner's inquest into the death of Princess Diana opens in January 2007. Over a year later, the jury returns a verdict of unlawful killing. It blames Diana's death on the grossly negligent driving of Henri Paul and the vehicles chasing them.
What's so strange about both these inquiries is that nowhere among the many people interviewed by the French and British authorities is there any mention of Lee Van Tan. The Paget report only briefly mentions the other Fiat Uno, saying that it belonged to a French citizen living in Paris. The details of the owner are known to Operation Paget. Well, that's just great that Lee Van Tan is known to Paget, but we want to know all about him.
McLaren submits a request for these details to the Metropolitan Police under the Freedom of Information Act.
After repeatedly chasing the police for an answer, they finally got back to me, only to say that it's okay for us to use the material which is in the public domain. But Lee Van Tan's name isn't in the public domain. That's why I put in the request. I want to know why Lee Van Tan is not mentioned in either of the British inquiries. They got their details from the French police, so I need to look at the French file on him.
But the French file is not available to the public, so McLaren taps his underground sources.
I was just about to go home, glad to leave Paris, and I got a phone call from my two friends in the paparazzi. They said they might have something very special for me. Here it is. It's the police investigation report. 2,000 pages, and I'm certain we're going to find information on Lee Van Tan.
McLaren scours the report for any mention of Lee Van Tan, but once again he hits a brick wall. Lee Van Tan is not mentioned anywhere.
My question is, has Lee Van Tan been erased from the record because he was never anywhere near the tunnel? Or is there something else going on?
The evidence that places Lee Van Tan in the tunnel is compelling. Sabine Dozon and her husband both identified him as the driver of the white Fiat they saw leaving the tunnel. He owns a dog just like the one they saw, and his license plate matches the numbers Sabine remembers. Although denied by Lee Van Tan, his own father said he repainted the car right after the crash. And the international forensic experts called in by Operation Paget to check the evidence said Lee Van Tan's car could not be conclusively ruled out. Yet the French police insist that Lee Van Tan was not in the tunnel because his left tail light is of the right year and model.
The French police argue that if it was Lee Van Tan's car, his taillight lens would have been replaced. Yet they don't bother to mention that he could have easily replaced it with a second-hand lens of the same model.
They also discounted him because the bumps on the rear of his Fiat don't match their reconstruction of the collision with the Mercedes. But McLaren has shown that their reconstruction is wrong. They position the vehicles inside the tunnel, whereas the collision happened at the top of the hill. A very different set of circumstances, which would affect the contact between the vehicles. McLaren then hits pay dirt. Among the 2,000 pages of the French investigation file, he finds a document signed by 4 members of the French police forensic laboratory. It helps confirm his theory about the collision.
It states the contact between the two vehicles could be between the front right wing and door of the Mercedes and the rear left panel of the Fiat Uno. In these photographs of the Mercedes, you can see the scratches here on the right front wing and door, just as it says in the document. The document also says that the rear left panel of the Fiat would have been damaged in the collision.
McLaren asks Sabine Dozon if she can remember those kind of scrapes on the Fiat Uno she saw. Through careful probing, he gets her to dredge up her original memories of the marks she saw on the Fiat all those years ago.
Just to stay on the damage on the side of the car, Do you think it was on the driver's door or the passenger door?
No, in the back.
The back.
Mm-hmm.
From the tail light
Behind
forward?
the driver, on the left.
Yes. East-west scrape
At
marks.
the end of the car.
Very good. Now, Sabine, I just want to draw a little sketch of a car which will represent the white Fiat. Now, you said you saw the driver of that vehicle that night.
He was sitting on the left, right?
That represents the driver.
Yeah.
You also said that there was a dog in the car.
Yeah.
Do you remember where the dog was?
Yes, just behind the driver. He was looking at the window.
So if we call that the dog. Now, can you, with this highlighter, indicate which rear tail light you saw that was damaged?
On this side. And there were scratches on the side of the car. This way.
To there.
I would say that, yeah.
Okay, and they're in the east-west direction?
Yeah, not up down, yes, east-west.
Thank you.
Sabine's recollection is extraordinary. It is the first time she has been able to describe such details to anyone. Both the French and British investigations missed this game-changing fact.
Sabine recalls seeing horizontal scrapes on the rear left side of the white Fiat, exactly as described in this document. This is extremely compelling evidence that it was Lee Van Tan's Fiat that collided with the Mercedes. So why has he been erased from the public record?
If he was involved, is Lee Van Tan an innocent man who just happens to get in the way of an inevitable accident? Or does he play a different role in the events of that night? Armed with a United Nations translator to report exactly what is said, McLaren decides to put these questions to the man himself. McLaren's paparazzi contacts know where to find him.
We've been up all night waiting for Lee Van Tan to come home, and I've just had a half-hour discussion with him on the driveway of his house. He made it very clear that he's had legal advice over and over again never to discuss this accident. Although he did make a very interesting comment about his time in custody. At the end, the police wanted him to sign his statement.
Lee Van Tan had already signed a statement at his local police station saying he was at work all that night. But he's since changed his story and admitted that he was driving in Paris at the time. He says he was about to sign a new statement, but was advised not to.
His sister jumped in and said, do not sign. If you sign this statement, you could go to jail for 5 years, as he refused to stop and help the injured people at the scene of the accident. To me, that tells me that he knew all about it and he was part of this accident. He was involved.
It strikes me as extremely odd that if he was innocently going about his business, why wouldn't he come forward and say, actually, I was sideswiped by this black Mercedes, I'm totally innocent, I'm sorry, I should have come forward earlier. Well, if he'd done that, there would have been no questions asked. It would have helped to solve the question.
The film's producers wrote to Lee Van Tan asking him to respond to their findings. However, he did not reply. The question that has hung over this case for nearly 20 years may finally have been answered. The white Fiat Uno did not disappear. It's merely been omitted from the public record, for reasons no one will explain. And it did not belong to a paparazzo, it belonged to Lee Van Tan. The question is, why was his car eliminated from the investigation? And why has his name been excluded from all the reports?
Could he be a police asset? One that they wanted to keep under wraps? It happens. Or could he be an innocent person in the wrong place at the wrong time? And they want to protect him from the media vultures. Whatever the reason or reasons, the public has a right to know.
The tragic death of Princess Diana inspired the biggest outpouring of grief the world has ever known. Yet the way the authorities have chosen to handle crucial information about the accident that took her life leads inevitably to further speculation and conspiracy theories, which in turn only prolong a painful uncertainty for all those who loved her.